saw that Matthew had 2 minutes left, so let's just take it for myself. I'm delighted to be here. I really want to congratulate and thank Esther for all that she's done to make this happen. You would not imagine if you hadn't been watching her. I'm also really pleased to be with this group of panelists whose work has informed my work, and both collaboratively and in reading. I guess both despite the fact that they're economists, and because they are economists, they're economists of a certain sort. I think that the first time I read Bo's, I think you called it your second paper, I thought, he has discovered what I have known for so long. So it was great. What I want to do today is tell you about one study, parts of it, all that link together, so it's going to be a kind of mad rush here. One of the things in the project on the next generation of teachers that's become my touchstone is that if something doesn't happen at the school for teachers, it might as well not happen at all. It just, that's where the action is. And so whoever those of you are who, inhabit these other rings, it's really all happening here. And if it doesn't happen there, it won't happen. So the study I'm going to tell you about, I conducted with Steph Reinhorn and Nicole Simon. I probably won't mention their names again. They're the ones that do the nice graphics, and I do the other things. We were interested in understanding the context that we've all been talking about a little bit more and linking it with certain practices. And I had been studying mixes of schools, successful schools, unsuccessful schools, and I decided I really wanted to look at successful schools and just see what was going on there for teachers. So we chose a sample of 6 elementary and middle schools within the same city. So they were located in the same city, but despite their proximity, they functioned in different policy contexts. That is, they were affected by charter school laws, state accountability regulations, local school policies, collective bargaining agreements. So they were within boundaries, but they were operating differently. And I want to tell you about each of these schools very, very briefly. Naylor and Rodriguez were state charter schools that had been established 10 and 20 years before we studied them. State-funded, free to hire and fire teachers, though actually, in fact, that happened very rarely. Kincaid, the third one, so the charter schools are to the left for those of you who are at a distance, and the district schools are to the right. Kincaid had been a failing middle school in the district until the state intervened and appointed a charter management organization to restart it. Almost no teachers reapplied, so the CMO hired an entirely new staff. But notably, the school was still serving the same community of students, and a high proportion of students returned that year. The state had taken over both Fitzgerald K-5 and Hurston K-8 because of chronically poor performance. The district appointed new principals, and they could rehire, as you know from Race to the Top, up to 50% of the school's current teachers, a percentage that was drawn from the heavens, I think. I still don't know where that came from. Although they actually only rehired 40% and 20%. And notably, as turnaround schools, they received substantial federal SIG grants, which they used to expand teachers' work day, professional development, hire additional administrators. Dickinson was a traditional district school, no special autonomies, operated under the board policy, the regular teacher's contract. All of these schools in 2013-14, when we studied them, were serving high poverty student populations, 70% or more on free or reduced lunch. And notably, they were all rated at that time at level 1 by the state, which was a student achievement measure, but also informed by reducing achievement gaps. So we chose to study 6 successful schools, and I won't do that again, but that's the way you have to understand that, in order to learn how this diverse group of schools approach the challenges of hiring, supporting, developing teachers. And all 6 that we asked to participate agreed, and so we were delighted. We interviewed 142 teachers and administrators. And what I want to do today is talk about 3 systems that were going on in those schools. What we found was, I don't know how, there we go. We found that there were surprisingly similar practices in 3 areas, and there were other areas where they weren't so similar: hiring, teams, and evaluation. I'm going to talk just the highlights of these systems today. We have separate working papers on each of them that are available on our website, and I'll show you the website address at the end. But the point here that I want to make is that none of these systems was independent of the others. They were interdependent and mutually reinforcing. And they contributed as a group to coherent practices day to day for the teachers and the principals in the school. And I would argue that the fact that they did that augmented their effectiveness. And that's kind of the punchline before you get into the details. So the first of these was hiring. These 6 schools had remarkably robust, thorough processes for recruiting and selecting teachers, what my former colleague Ed Liu first called information-rich hiring. They had application and screening, resume and cover letter, which they reviewed carefully. These were not just kept in some manila folder downtown. In some schools followed up with a phone call or a writing assignment, which was fairly common, to determine if the candidate seemed to fit with the school's mission. They then followed with an administrative interview, usually by the principal. Kincaid's principal explained that he used interviews to weigh the will-skill dimension. He said, we try to limit as many low-will hires as we can because will is the thing that we found we cannot change or don't have the patience to change. Now, most other school selection processes stop there. There's an interview, the principal offers a contract. But as the Fitzgerald administrator explained, you can have the most fabulous answers in an interview, but if the candidate can't stand up in front of the class and build positive relationships with students, it's not going to be a good fit. Every school in our sample required candidates to do a demonstration lesson. It actually often was less important, the lesson itself, because they weren't their students and they hadn't really worked with them over time. But the debrief was really important. This was the reflection on how it went. And it was with the principal, but often with team members, with a team of teachers, often the people that individual might be working with. What did the candidate say went well? What didn't go so well? How'd she do? How does she respond to critique or to suggestions? And then often the candidates were meeting with fellow teachers, prospective teachers. At one school, they were asked to collaborate with teachers on a team in a data analysis task because they wanted to know what their skills there were. References were, I don't need that one. References were checked very carefully. This was not routine kind of thing. And then they courted the candidates because they had invested a huge amount of time in getting to the end of this process, and often their most attractive candidates had several offers. So that was hiring. Teams were central to improvement in 5 of the 6 schools. The other school had a lot of collaboration, but not so much teamwork. Other studies have shown that teachers give teacher teams mixed reviews at best. And I know Matt and John and I conducted one of these where that's what we heard quite clearly. Virtually none of the teachers we interviewed in these schools suggested that team meetings lacked purpose, wasted their time, or were hijacked by administrators. Many in all schools described how teams sustained them. We asked an experienced teacher at Fitzgerald where she went. We asked her where she went for teaching support. She said quickly, my team members. We asked further, what kinds of support she might seek, and she said everything, every day, many times. Her principal reflected on the school's rapid improvement during turnaround. She said, I would say a lot of our success is because we really work at teams. The primary unit is the grade level team. It's really like you are married to your team. So the teams had, this is my slide, you can tell, it doesn't dance. Two kinds of teams, content teams, focusing on the academic content. That included curriculum development, lesson planning, data about students' learning and achievement, unit tests, exit tickets, interim assessments, all that. The second area of focus was a student cohort, and so that would be the 7th grade or the Mackenzie group or whatever, about individual students' well-being, the cohort's behavior or discipline, and practices that might contribute to a more positive cohort culture. Team time was carefully scheduled. It was never stolen. It was truly inviolable. And we talked about that a little bit earlier today, this issue of time. One teacher at Hurston said, we now have schedules that are like a dream. And I remember interviewing her, she said, like a dream. It's arranged so that our content and our grade level meetings are 2 consecutive hours a week. That uninterrupted time is so precious that we can actually get a whole lot of work done. Principals remained actively involved and engaged with the work of teams. Some were present, and really involved in the details. Some were monitoring them. At a minimum, they endorsed the team's importance, if for no other reason that they never interrupted it, and they monitored their deliberations and decisions. So although teams increased the demands on teachers, they also provided significant professional payoff, and teachers widely viewed the team time as time well spent. The third piece of this, oh, I keep hitting the laser, sorry, was supervision and evaluation. An administrator at Kincaid Charter expressed a view that we heard in other words from other people. We believe that teachers grow with immediate feedback and real-time instruction on how they are performing and giving them opportunity to fix that in the moment. What was most striking was how frequently these teachers were observed. Approximately 40% of the 99 teachers we interviewed said they were observed and received feedback at least twice a month. Approximately 20% estimated that they were observed and given feedback between 5 and 10 times per year, and the final 40% estimated that they'd been observed 1 to 4 times a year, which was consistent with the new state requirements. The frequency of observations varied within schools, with newer teachers and novice teachers getting more than more experienced teachers, but overall, each of these schools exceeded the state's requirements. 3 schools expanded and reorganized their administrative staff. So some of them had extra money, that's a whole other issue. They hired more administrative staff to do the operations, and the instructional administrators spent their time in an amazing way in classrooms. The director of operations at Hurston explained, my role has been to block and tackle so that the evaluators can spend their time in the classroom coaching teachers and being at teacher team meetings. Teachers use phrases, now think about how most teachers talk about evaluation. Teachers use phrases such as hugely helpful or feeling super supported in expressing their appreciation for frequent class visits and feedback, and they repeatedly said they would like more. As Principal Hines explained, I think evaluation without ongoing supervision is meaningless. It becomes only the way that you terminate employment. We need to be in classrooms all the time, giving feedback, asking questions, pushing people, and then all of that just gets rolled up into an evaluation. No surprises. Teachers in most of these schools, most teachers in most schools said that that's in fact where the summative evaluations came from. This was nothing new to them by the time they got to March, and therefore it was legitimate. So what I want to emphasize is the way, again, each of these is much more complex, but it would make no sense for me to tell you it all depends on hiring or it all depends on teams because these were so interactive. Every school had strong hiring practices to ensure that its teachers would be well matched with their school and therefore could be counted on as contributing members of the professional community. No teacher was hired who wasn't excited about collaboration. Thorough hiring practices then prepared these new teachers for their team's expectations. And it led the teachers on the team to view their colleagues positively. As one said, they're all rock solid. Teams themselves were not standalone initiatives, but they were part of the fabric of these schools. Teachers then were receiving feedback from their peers and receiving feedback from administrators. There was a kind of shared responsibility there. And therefore, neither teams nor administrators bore the full responsibility. Right on time. That's the website address. Thank you.
Couldn't have planned that any better if you tried.